and welcome once again to Making Tracks. We're in the South Tyrol in the beautiful Italian village of Bolzano, terminus of a delightful railway.
And we'll be seeing it later in the programme.
But first we travel to Russia, where not so long ago, steam rail tours were unheard of. However, things are very different now. The recent freedom of access has resulted in many steam-hauled rail tours, including the Baltic Coast Express, which ran from Brest to St. Petersburg. One of the types of loco used was the famous P-36 express passenger engine. Introduced in 1950, they were intended to revitalize long-distance passenger services which had become neglected during the war. A total of 250 locos were built at Kolomna, 72 miles southeast of Moscow, but they had an incredibly short life due to the decision to go diesel in 1955. Many of the depots in Russia have an allocation of steam locos for use as stationary boilers, such as this 210 Kriegslock. Next to this was a 262 Class SU former passenger loco, of which 3,750 were built between 1910 and 1951. The next type of loco on the special was an example of the 210 Class L. Its light axle loading made it a very successful all-purpose design. More than 5,000 were built between 1945 and 1954. Russia still has countless stored steam locos at many sites, presumably for strategic reserve. Consequently, there's no shortage of candidates for preservation, although the variety of classes in Russia is limited. On now to Estonia and the historic city of Tallinn, where a nearby narrow-gauge preservation site was home to several old diesels and a Tampala 080 of 1947. Back at Tallinn, another Class SU was seen, again in use as a stationary boiler. On this engine, remnants of the green livery carried by old Soviet passenger engine locos are still visible. The third class to be used on the Baltic Coast Express was the 010 Class E. This was the world's most prolific class of locomotive. Total numbers built are estimated at between 12 and 13,000, more than the entire British Rail steam fleet in 1960. The E-Class loco took the special on to St. Petersburg. This then was the end of a memorable rail tour. Well, almost. In steam at the station was a magnificent old Class O locomotive dating from 1889. These two-cylinder 080 compounds were built with variations until 1923, reaching a grand total of over 9,000. This loco is preserved in the St. Petersburg Railway Museum and provides superb photographic opportunities in a country where, not long ago, a camera would have been strictly forbidden.
Time now to see some more steam specials on Britain's main lines. This is our first look at one of the LMS Black 5 locomotives, seen here at work around Glasgow on the 31st of October 1993. This engine is number 44871, which spent most of its working life south of the border. Introduced in 1934, this was one of Sir William Stanier's most successful designs. Although lacking the prestige of his express passenger locos such as the Royal Scot and Coronation classes, the 460 Class 5, or Black 5s as they became known, were a highly successful mixed traffic design, and 842 were built. That's a small amount by Russian standards, but in Britain one of the most numerous classes to be found. Not surprisingly, 18 locomotives have been saved for preservation. Many of these are seen all over Great Britain, at work on preserved railways or on the main line. Number 44871 was built at Crewe in 1945 and carries the name Sovereign. It received this name after preservation. In fact, only 4 of the 842 locos carried nameplates during their working lives. Considered mundane and commonplace, these locos were largely ignored by enthusiasts during their time on the LMS and BR. Now they're very much the centre of attention, especially when they produce spirited departures such as this. Number 44871 was at work again on the 6th of November 1993 on a run from Stirling to Inverness, providing an atmospheric sight in the late autumn mist. So without further comment, sit back and enjoy these sequences. Another Black 5 is featured now, this time in miniature, the product of a master craftsman in Belgium.
At Enghien, near Brussels, is the workshop of Mr. Tensted, who combines his love of steam locomotives with a passion for precision engineering to produce some stunning models. The results speak for themselves, and we found out how it all began.
I know the steam era very well, and I have always been fascinated by these beautiful monsters.
The full-scale versions have always been a source of inspiration for modelers who put in untold hours of skill and dedication. The results you see here running on a miniature railway in Belgium have come from several sources.
These machines come from England or Germany, but some also are built here in Belgium. In general, they are individually crafted, but it is also possible to buy these locos in kit form.
The building of one of these engines from scratch is a daunting prospect. It requires specialist machinery to make the locomotive parts. Mr. Tensted and his colleagues are the builders of this superb Black 5 model. He told us something of its background.
This machine I made in 1970, over 20 years ago. It's a reproduction of an English locomotive which ran on the LMS line, that's the London, Midland and Scottish. This is a model reduced to 1/8 of the original. They still exist. In fact, this is one of the most popular locos for tourists in the UK, and more than 15 of them are preserved in England. This loco can generate 4.5 to 5 horsepower and can pull 3.5 tons. I have already carried nearly 40 people with it.
A
machine like this needs about 400 hours to produce the loco with all its details, including the tender. I would need about 6 or 7 years to build one.
The final result is a perfect scale model of the original, working in exactly the same way as its full-size counterpart, which is to run large annual mileages. It's great to see these models being built and running on the mainland of Europe, as well as the UK. Long may it continue. Our look at miniature railways takes us now to an unexpected location. The Scottish Isles.
This 10.25-inch gauge railway on the island of Mull was opened in 1984 and provided a 2-mile link from the pier at Craignure to Torresay Castle. It was opened to the public in 1975. On the 22nd of June 1994, a special event took place outside the new shed at Torresay, the naming of a new locomotive, Victoria. The ScotRail Customer Services Manager, Graham Smith, performed the naming ceremony, much to the delight of the many guests and members of the railway who came here to witness the event. Once the formalities were complete, Victoria staged some fine run-pasts before returning with the guests to Craignure. This is the only railway on the islands of Scotland. A little off the beaten track, but well worth a visit to see Torresay Castle and the miniature line that serves it.
The Renana Railway is now completely isolated, although once it went down all the way to Bolzano, including a rack section.
On the plateau above Bolzano, or Bozen, there's a community of about 6,000 people, of which 96% are of Austrian origin. Local pressure resulted in a line being built in 1906 from the central square in Bolzano, the Balterplatz, and climbing up a rack line to Supra Bolzano. The upper section from Maria Assunta to Klobenstein is on the level and uses adhesion only. The surprising thing about the upper section is the remarkably gentle rural aspect of the railway, meandering through pastures and woodland, belying the height of the shelf it operates on. The rack section from Bolzano to Maria Assunta was eventually lifted after a train jumped the rails in December 1964, causing the death of 4 passengers. It left the upper section isolated. The local road looked like being the death knell of the line, but the railway has since been totally refurbished with overhead contact lines, new track and level crossing equipment, and the old cars lovingly restored at Klobenstein. It was well worth it. To cope with the ever-increasing demand, the Ritnerbahn has invested in several second-hand cars from Germany. The little spur from what was the rack section at Maria Assunta is used occasionally for school children and for special parties, and is one of the most photogenic sections of the line. The Ritnerbahn celebrated its 85th anniversary in 1992, and now has an assured future. Vehicles dating from 1907 need a lot of maintenance, and are used more and more only on specials. A crowd puller par excellence, this unique mountain railway contributes to the income of the tourist trade, and when the weather is a bit moist, provides a grand panoramic view of an unforgettable area without having to get your feet wet. From small locomotives, we change the scale to see some giants of steam operating in Zimbabwe.
This country has always been a very popular destination for railway enthusiasts due to the wealth and variety of steam action to be found here. Just east of Bulawayo is a large industrial site. Here we see one of the Zimbabwe Cement Company's 12th class locomotives shunting in the yards. On to Bulawayo Station, where a 15th class Garrett passes with a coal train for the town's power station. 11 locos are used daily on local goods workings and all the shunts around the town are still steam operated. The 15th class are of double 4-6 four-wheel arrangement, and 32 were built by Bayer Peacock between 1948 and 1952. A special rail tour working at the time saw 14th class Garrett and the class 9B number 115 backing onto the train bound for the West Nicholson branch. The 9B was built in 1917 by the Springburn Works of the North British Company in Glasgow. All the time it was possible to see steam activity such as this Garrett taking a goods train out of Westgate Yard. Back to the special train, now on the West Nicholson branch, where the 14th class Garrett and the 9B are taking the train past Heaney Junction. The 14th class is a Bayer Peacock double 262, 18 of which were built in 1953. The class 9B was replaced by a powerful 16th class Garrett in order to tackle the severe gradients on the lower sections of the branch. This line was built in 1903 and is lightly laid with minimal civil engineering works. Consequently, there is a distinct absence of tunnels and bridges, resulting in a contour-hugging line with tight curves and steep gradients, ideal for Garrett operation. Gouanda is the midpoint of the branch and an important market town, the main area produce being beef and mealie meal, plus a brewery. Another sunrise sees an eagle vulture, most appropriately surveying eagle vulture sidings, where the northbound special train is passing. The train arrives at Mbalabala, where the Class 9B is waiting to take over. Here, the 16th class is detached, and the 9B continues the journey with a 14th class Garrett providing banking assistance. Our final shots are of Bulawayo Depot at dawn. Bulawayo has always been a mecca for the foreign steam enthusiast, and the current plan for local shunts to be steam operated for the next 5 years, plus the running of more steam specials, should keep them coming. Well, that's all for this week. Next week's Making Tracks will find us once more in South Africa, where amazingly live mainline steam can still occasionally be found. And we shall be visiting the land of the rising sun to observe preserved steam locomotives in action.
The programme comes from the Midland Railway Centre in Derbyshire, which provide a wealth of attractions as well as their standard gauge operations. So, until next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.